It might be time to start ranking Malik Neighbors as a top 5 wide receiver on a weekly basis among the other elite wide receivers. We dig into our week 4 wide receiver and tight end rankings on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com. Those of you in the path of the storm, Helene, be careful. I mean, I'm in it here in Charlotte. It's raining. So just be careful this weekend, and hopefully we'll have a good weekend of football to get into with our fantasy teams, and stay safe and healthy out there first and foremost.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm happy you brought that up. That storm seems pretty scary. Both my brothers are in Orlando right now dealing with it. So everybody stay safe out there. Hopefully, the weather subsides and everyone's good to go for this weekend to watch some football. I want to let everyone know this episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. All you have to do is go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use code all lowercase LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. We are getting into our wide receiver and tight end rankings today for week 4. We already did our quarterback and running back rankings on yesterday's show. So if you missed that, you can go back and listen after you listen to this episode. But starting right at the top with our wide receivers, we got the usual suspects: Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase. Of course, you're playing those guys. And of course, you're playing Marvin Harrison Jr. But I just wanted to point out you have him as your wide receiver 2 this week. Amazing matchup against the Commanders.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a nuts game. I mean, if you want to watch an exciting game go back and forth with a lot of scoring, I think this is going to be it. The defenses are not very good, and Marvin Harrison can blow up like he did just a couple weeks ago. He still scored a touchdown last week. The rookie talked about at the top in the intro, Malik Neighbors. I'm pretty high. I'm at number 6. So it's just hard to know who's going to score multiple touchdowns from these guys in a given week, but that's how good they are. I mean, we thought this could happen. So if you ended up with Harrison or Neighbors at their cost, you've been very happy with that early in the season. So yeah, lock them in. I mean, Neighbors, the Cowboys are not the scary defense that we think they are. So Neighbors is going to be just fine. He's going to see a massive target share again. That's what's been great about Harrison Neighbors. As expected, both these guys are dominating targets. And Trey McBride is battling a concussion, may not clear protocol, so it could be even more targets for Harrison this week.
Yeah, we're going to talk about another wide receiver from the Cardinals later on in today's show. That's a bit farther down my rankings, but a guy is a flyer. But just hitting on Malik Neighbors a little bit more. I have him at 8, and it's probably just too low, right? You have him at 6. Maybe we should be ranking him top 5 every single week. And you brought up Dallas isn't too scary of a matchup. He has finished as the wide receiver 3 in both of the last 2 weeks. He leads the NFL with 37 targets. He's one of just 2 players with 30 targets, and he has 37. Amon-Ra is the other one. So he's just been fantastic. Moving on in our rankings, we both love Nico Collins this week against the Jaguars. Great matchup. He seems to just, he's just a great player. So he's an easy top 10 guy. DK Metcalf has been absolutely killing it. Is it just the Seahawks' new offense? Is this going to keep going? Are we too low on him at wide receiver 10? He finished as a wide receiver 2 weeks ago, wide receiver 9 last week. Is this just the role he's playing now? He's going to get those big plays in this new offense?
Yeah, it's exciting. They're running a lot more plays, so that's great. I mean, they're an up-tempo offense, and we didn't talk as much as we should have, I think, about the Seahawks in the offseason. It was hard to know exactly what you're going to get. Geno Smith was coming off a down season, but this offense, he's taking a liking to it, and really it goes a lot through DK Metcalf. A little bit Jackson's been the Jigba. Tyler Lockett's been involved, but Noah Fant was even involved last week. But really, it's kind of a limited passing weapons offense where it's still going to be more of Metcalf and JSN in most weeks here producing. And then they've also had the wrinkle of not having Kenneth Walker. Zach Charbonnet has been great filling in. He's just been seamless in taking over the backfield. So this offense is really humming. Ryan Grubb kind of knows what he's doing. And this week, they're a really good spot here on Monday night against Detroit. I mean, Detroit doesn't have anyone on the outside that can really cover Metcalf. So really excited about that. And again, And the only reason I think he's down here is look, we had to put people like Collins and the big guys and Neighbors and Harrison ahead of him. That's the only reason. I mean, any of these guys in the top 10, keep them on. When we put them in the top 10, anybody can finish as the one. We're betting on one of these guys to do that based on the potential to score multiple touchdowns. That's what it usually takes to finish as wide receiver one.
Yeah, there's just a lot of guys that it just seem like they have such great potential with their target share that they're getting, with the downfield targets that they're getting. And the passing game finally started to heat up last week. And as the season progresses, we should start seeing more of that, right? So these wide receivers that we were expecting to be great and a little bit disappointing, they're going to bounce back. And that happened with Amari Cooper last week, right? He scores twice. He gets the targets again. Like, he was getting the targets. And I was saying, like, just wait. The production will come. He's getting the targets. Finally came. We're aligned on him this week. We both have him as a wide receiver 14 against the Raiders. Cooper has 29 targets this season, tied for the third most in the NFL. And, the Raiders allowed Deontay Johnson to have a big game last week, allowed Zay Flowers to have a big game in week 2. And then McConkey scored a touchdown, as well as, they're just allowing touchdowns like crazy to wide receivers, with 4 different wide receivers already having a touchdown against the Raiders this year. So a good play. But one guy we're not aligned on is Tyreek Hill. And I understand, right? And we're not that far off. I have him at wide receiver 11. You have him at 17. That's like, even 11 is probably like crazy for Tyreek Hill. But what do we do with him against the Titans? And who's going to be the starting for the Dolphins? That's the biggest question.
Yeah, going back to Cooper, who knew? This is another revenge game. He already said 2 in 4 weeks. He had the Cowboys in
Yeah.
week 1. He gets the Raiders here. This is a much better matchup for him, and they should dominate. And Deshaun Watson, by the way, not bad as a deeper play this week, because he's had 2 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. So he's actually maybe looking up, and that helps Cooper. Now, Tyreek Hill, he's got actually a former backup of Deshaun Watson. That's right, because Tyler Huntley was a Brown, and Jameis Winston won that job, and then the Ravens put him back on the practice squad. But he looks like he's going to be the starting quarterback in his hometown, by the way, of Miami, on Monday Night Football. So this guy's a Pro Bowler in 2022. So
Crazy.
they might actually have a quarterback option. But my concern here for Tyreek Hill and Joe Waddle is, what did the Packers do last week against the Titans? You got a running quarterback now in Huntley. They could just treat him as Lamar Jackson and go nuts running with him in that matchup with him and Devin Achane, right? So Tyreek Hill, again, has got to get the ball downfield with precision. This Titans secondary has been playing actually pretty well. Denard Wilson has come in and done a good job here. So really the Titans' run defense is their weakness, surprisingly, because of the beef that they have up front. So that's the way I would attack them a lot on the ground. So that worries me that Tyreek Hill's not going to get enough targets as a brand new quarterback, but at least I think he has a better shot of doing something. But still, I have him as a wide receiver 2. You have him as a borderline wide receiver 1. Much better shot of doing something with Huntley in there than Tim Boyle would be filling in for Skylar Thompson and Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah, at least Huntley out there, it would give us hope, right? I still am not pumped to play Waddle, but Tyreek Hill's too good, and you're still plugging him in. And if Huntley's out there, you actually have hope that he can have a big game. One guy we expect to have a big game, you're really high on him this week. It's DJ Moore against the Rams. Totally get it. The Rams secondary stinks. So you have DJ Moore at 13. The reason I have DJ Moore at 17 instead of higher is because I also think Roma Dunze is going to have a great week.
Yeah.
So I have Moore at 17, Roma Dunze at 20, and you're down on a Dunze at wide receiver 32 this week. It does look like Keenan Allen could be back, so maybe that's part of it. But the Rams have just been atrocious, right? They allowed Juwan Jennings to go off on them, Marvin Harrison to go off on them the week prior, and Jamison Williams to have a massive game in week 1. Like, each week they're letting one player have a huge game, but the difference is with this Bears team, they don't have a run game. Like, they cannot run the ball. So they're going to have to pass. And there is room for both Moore and Adunze to have big games. Obviously, if Keenan Allen comes in and gets 10 targets, like, one of these guys are going to disappoint. But I don't really see that happening. I think they're going to slowly work back in Keenan Allen. So I love both Moore and Adunze this week.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance Allen could miss the game. We know what happened last year. It seems like I've seen him more. I was talking about this. Maybe it was here on the show. I cannot remember at this point. There's so much going on. But, like, just him, I've seen him more in street clothes looking at the game than I've seen him actually playing the last 2 seasons. Like, what kind of a move was this? I mean, Keenan Allen was supposed to help, but in a way, I think not having that little security blanket of Allen has kind of opened things up a little bit for Caleb Williams. Like he's just not targeting Allen there in the slot and being safe. He's now aggressively throwing because Moore and Odunze can stretch the field. We said this is why you should draft Odunze, because we said if someone's going to get hurt and drop out of this offense, it's going to be Keenan Allen. It didn't take long. It took one game for him to be on the field, and that was it. And then I think this lingers here. So I wouldn't say if Allen doesn't play, I would bump him up a few more spots mentally in my rankings. But I also do think Cole Kmet at tight end is going to get some key targets as well.
Yeah, I mean, and last week we saw Moore, Dunze, and Kmet all have a good game. Again, like they just don't have a run game. They have to pass so much. So in that same vein, like that's why we have Caleb Williams as a playable guy this week as well, because we think these weapons will be good. One guy we have not mentioned because we finally have him ranked outside the top 20 wide receivers. It's Garrett Wilson. So we will be hitting on him in just a moment after we hear from one of our sponsors. But I'm proud of us for finally moving him down our rankings. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I've used this app so many times, and I can tell you it's so easy to use. And what I love about it is I get to see my seat before I purchase. So I know exactly where I'm sitting. I know exactly what my view is going to be. I have no surprises. I'm not going to get there and just be like, there's an object in front of me and I can't see what I want to see. There's just like, you know what you're getting. Also, it takes like literal seconds to buy the tickets, two taps and you are set. And then tickets are sent directly to your phone. So you never have to dig through your email. Take the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, you just create an account on the Game Time app, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. What time is it? Game time. Garrett Wilson, we finally moved him down. All the way down to wide receiver 26 for me, wide receiver 23 for you. It's just, it doesn't matter who his quarterback is. It seems like he's going to put up anywhere from 30 to 60 yards in any given game. And he got lucky last week with that short touchdown to save his fantasy day a little bit. But his fantasy finishes so far this year have been 33, 32, and 26. And now he gets Pat Surtain against the Broncos. No, thank you. Like I just not excited for him. I'm sure 26 is even too high to rank him.
Yeah, I think it's just been difficult because Aaron Rodgers is not throwing the way we expected in terms of a high volume. They've been leaning a lot on the running game, and if Garrett Wilson is not needed to win games as much, they're not going to force it to him. And he did score last week, but you mentioned very tough matchup against the Broncos, and then the Vikings coming up in a game internationally. So, yeah, he's a tough guy to trust. He's got a great amount of talent. That is not a question. It's just in this particular offense, he's not a guy that gets targeted enough to make that happen in key situations. So, yeah, just being modest about him. I think you have to play him because the talent is wide receiver 2, but you don't need to extend more than that. Terry McLaurin, my guy that I've been trying to push up here, he was being drafted as a wide receiver 3. Big week last week connecting as they finally unleashed Jane Daniels to throw him downfield after 2 very quiet weeks. Which is the McLaurin we'll see in Arizona, Michelle?
You know, that's why I think we're being a little safe here with our ranking because we both have him at wide receiver 22.
Yeah.
And I think we're playing a bit safe. The first 2 weeks were atrocious, but obviously last week, like you brought up, finishes as a wide receiver 10. I do think they finally started to click. I think they're starting to trust Jaden Daniels to throw it down the field. Terry McLaurin has been patient with him, and I think he's earned that. He gets a nice matchup against Arizona this week. Amon-Ra had a great game against them. Khalil Shakir had a great game. I think Terry McLaurin's going to have a really good game again. It's just hard to trust him putting him into the teens just yet. I need to see it for a second straight week before I push him up too high.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, and he also has to get the deep balls, right, to make it happen. And sometimes you can't connect on those. So let me look at, speaking of guys that got some deep balls, Deontay Johnson, he gets the Bengals there on the, Bengals at home. I was trying to confuse all the cat teams for a second, but Juwan Jennings is facing the Patriots at home after a big week. Now, the early reports are George Kittle is getting a limited practice with a hamstring. Debo does not look like he'll practice, so definitely Jennings looks like he will start again with Brandon Ayuk at wide receiver. Deontay Johnson, keep in mind, an injury there that had Adam Thielen go down with a hamstring. So both these guys could really be seeing key targets as starters this week from their quarterbacks. So Purdy and Dalton. So again, where do you go here with these guys? I think you play them as wide receiver threes based on their situations. At this point in the matchup, say that as well.
I feel really good about I feel great about both. But
Yeah,
Deontay Johnson, he got so many targets last week,
yeah,
14. And it was also like in a game that it was a pretty blowout, right? Like I expect the Bengals to be able to keep up with if, like, let's say the Panthers offense looks as good as they did last week, which I don't fully expect,
yeah,
but like the Bengals will be able to keep up as well. So they're going to have to be passing even more. You brought up Adam Thielen's on IR. Like he's going to get a ton of targets. So Deontay Johnson's always been a good wide receiver, and the Bengals defense right now is atrocious. So I feel good about Deontay as a wide receiver too this week. Juwan Jennings, obviously, it's always nerve wracking to go back to a guy, and he's not going to put up close to 175 yards
yeah,
and 3 touchdowns. But he is a good player, and he is going to be trusted by Brock Purdy. It isn't a matchup that's beatable. Christian Gonzalez, you'd expect to be more on Brandon Ayuk, who just did a great job against Wilson last week. So I'm fine with Juwan Jennings back into my lineup. I won't be surprised at all if it's 5 receptions, 90 yards, and a touchdown this week.
yeah, no, yeah. You just go back right there. I mean, until we see Samuel on the field, you have to go Jennings here again. Also, Jennings is making up for the lack of Christian McCaffrey catching passes. It doesn't look like he's going to come back at least before week 5. So really tough break there. So, but Jennings involved, Johnson involved. Now, let's look at these guys, Michelle. Who would you like of this group? First, Rashid Shaheed. He's playing the Falcons in Atlanta. Jackson Smith and the Jigbaz also on the road in Detroit, and Khalil Shakir for the Bills also in a road game against the Ravens. So who do you like and why here of this group?
I think I like JSN the most. You
Mm-hmm.
really can't run on the Lions. They're going to have to pass a lot. He got only 3 targets last week, but they're beating up on Miami. Like, and then DK Metcalf had the big plays. Like, they didn't need JSN last week, but I do think they'll need him in this matchup. So I would go with Jackson Smith and Jigba first. I like Rashid Shaheed still had 5 targets, right? It's going to be that type of player that's going to have, just disastrous fantasy days and then huge fantasy days. The Falcons matchup isn't necessarily one I want to target. They have good safeties. They have a good secondary. I do think they're going to be focused on making sure Shaheed doesn't have a big play. So I think I'd go JSN, then Khalil Shakir, who's looking like Josh Allen's top target, and it should be a closer game than, the Bills have been destroying people, but it should be a close game against the Ravens. So lots of throwing, and maybe Josh Allen for once has to play in the 4th quarter. That would be awesome. And then, again, JSN, Shakir, and then Shaheed.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I would look at it in my rankings. I feel pretty close there between JSN and Shakir, but yeah, I don't love Shaheed this week. I think big play needs to come. Now, let's go to a couple of younger breakout receivers. You have Michael Wilson, you have Jalen Tolbert, and then you have Tutu Atwell. How would you break these guys down based on their matchups?
Michael Wilson's one of my favorite flyers this week, and he's probably sitting out there in your waivers. So if you're desperate this week, you're trying to find someone with your injuries or, just disappointing players. Again, he gets Washington just like Marvin Harrison Jr. does. And Washington's defense is terrible. But last week, Michael Wilson ran 1 fewer route and had 1 fewer target than Marvin Harrison Jr. He had 9 targets last week. He actually caught 3 more balls than Marvin Harrison Jr. He led the team with co-led the team. Both Harrison and Wilson had 64 yards. Like he was on the field more. He got the targets, and I think they're going to start utilizing him, especially if Trey McBride has to miss. Obviously, if McBride's in, that kind of dampers him. But if McBride misses, I think Michael Wilson is a great play this week.
Absolutely. And yeah, he comes into play. Tolbert, if you're stuck, you can play him tonight. You have Atwell. We've talked about a lot as a waiver pickup as well, with his situation for the Rams being key with Cooper Kupp out. So very good wide receiver 3 values there that could give you a little bit more than that in terms of production and their finish this week. Now, Michael Pittman Jr. and Zay Flowers. Now, Pittman has really been the pit. I mean, no pun intended. He's just been terrible. And part of his Anthony Richardson's terrible. He's looking too much for the deep ball. He's not throwing the short to intermediate, move the chains ball that we're looking for as much. And that's Pittman's specialty, right? So we haven't seen a lot of Pittman do that. So I would fade him again. Playing the Steelers secondary, I just don't not interested. And Zay Flowers, I also don't love. The Ravens are throwing the ball a little bit more, spreading around Nelson Aguilar. and Rashad Bateman, but the Bills secondary has been really good in the back end. So these are two very tough secondary matchups for two struggling players that I don't really want to see in my lineup this week.
Yeah, I want to ask, like, would you play any of Michael Wilson, Jalen Tolbert, and Tutu Atwell over Michael Pittman Jr. and Zay Flowers? For me, it's definitely over Michael Pittman.
Yeah.
Like, he's been the wide receiver 60, 64, and 56. And the Steelers defense this week, like, no way am I putting Michael Pittman in my roster. Zay Flowers, that one's more tough, right? Because we have seen a good week from him in week 2. It should be a high-scoring affair. So it's harder to play those guys over Zay Flowers, but where would you go?
Yeah, I think I'd still stick with Flowers. It's not as juicy as it is. I'm going to stick with Flowers this week. So, yeah, I mean, he's the guy that's the proven commodity there with Lamar. And again, we've seen the production. It was just a quiet week last week.
True. All right, we're going to move out over to our tight end rankings to finish up our week 4 rankings this week, right after we hear from another one of our sponsors.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the early part of the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a bunch and a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started there with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Only on FanDuel. Again, only on FanDuel.com. Check out. It's a great time to get in the action. We have a slightly bigger sample size going to week 4. We're about to pass the quarter part of the season here. So a lot of special bets that you can look for on FanDuel now. Again, you have to act so you can get that $5 bet and those $200 in bonus bets right now. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. All right, Michelle, time to continue the show and look at our tight end rankings for the week. Now, another injury concern we're dealing with, let's start with this, and actually 3 injury concerns. Making that 3. Trey McBride, however, looks the least likely to play. He has not cleared concussion protocol in the middle of the week here, so that's usually not a great sign. He could be still cleared on Friday, but just prepare to play without McBride. George Kittle seems to be trending in the right direction with his hamstring, getting in some limited practice, so he has a chance to return. And then Sam Laporte, a low ankle sprain for him, so we'll see if he can go. So a lot of question marks there right at the top there with their scoring and statuses. Now, this is the one we totally disagree on. You could talk about any of those 3 guys if you want as well, but Travis Kelce is an interesting one because of these injuries, because of these concerns, and the matchup Travis Kelce has with the Chargers. I'm putting him as a tight end 2 overall. Now, Michelle, you can shake your head at that quite a bit. I know you're doing that, but I think this is the Travis Kelce breakout game coming. He owns the Chargers, and really the last 6 meetings, he's had big games, and this one is going to be no exception.
I hope so. Like, I hope you're right. And I still have him at 6. It's not like I'm burying him, but this dude has done nothing so far. He's been the tight end 14, 46, and 19. And like, those might not sound like the lowest numbers of 14 and 19, but at the tight end position, it is. That means you're doing absolutely nothing. And he's out there on the field, right? He's played the 5th most team snaps among all tight ends this year. He's just not getting the targets. And what scared me the most is that Kelce got in Mahomes' ear at halftime last week, and Mahomes was like, fine. He targeted him a couple times, right? And you're like, okay, you just had to get in his ear, and then completely went away from him the rest of the game. It was like, all right, I'll make you happy for a couple times, but then no. Like, I don't know what's going on here. I get it. The Chargers, especially with Derwin James out this week because he's suspended, it's a good matchup for him, and he does typically destroy him, but I can't put him at 2 any longer.
Yeah, I'm putting up 2 for that. I mean, Derwin James is not always in coverage against him, but he can smack him after the catch. That's what happened with Pat Freiermuth last week. That kind of put the violations over the top for James to be suspended. I do like the fact that you could see a lot of Denzel Perryman, who's a little bit older. He's 31. He's a linebacker that is typically not good in coverage. And also the Chargers, this is very important. They can handle, I think, with their coverage and contain them in a big plays what Rashee Rice does. So, again, I looked at it. Travis Kelce was used to getting a 24% target share the last couple seasons without Tyreek Hill in the mix. That has dropped down to 14. At the same time, you're looking at Now, Rashee Rice eating up 34% of the targets. So that is going to change, right? There's an adjustment. Nobody takes a third of their team's targets consistently this season, even like most targeted guys. So I think what's going to happen is you'll see some regression to the mean. You'll see the matchups and coverage start to drift more toward Rice. And then to make Mahomes, crazy it sounds, beat you, Travis Kelce, he's going to be a little bit more open, I think, starting this week against the Chargers.
I hope you're right. I do. But the one guy I have ahead of Travis Kelce, actually two of them. I have Jake Ferguson and Dallas Goedert right above
Okay.
Travis Kelce there. I have Ferguson at 4, Goddard at 5. You have Ferguson down at 8, and Goddard down at 13. So definitely different on these. Ferguson's injury looked like it was going to be legit, like a long time. And then he comes back after missing just one game and gets 11 targets, 6 receptions, 95 yards, only played 66% of the snaps because he's just getting back from injury. He's typically above that 80% line. That's what we started to see him doing it towards the end of last year. So that should go up as he gets healthier. The targets are going to be there because it's CeeDee Lamb and then Jake Ferguson as the second target. And he gets those goal line targets. They haven't always turned into touchdowns, but he gets them. So it's hard to find a safer tight end than Jake Ferguson.
Yeah, he's pretty safe, plug and play. I mean, it doesn't matter. You had Luke Schoonmaker step in and he produced. And before him, Dalton Schultz did. So this position is going to produce because Prescott likes throwing to it and playing off those wide receivers quite a bit.
And then with Dallas Goedert, I mean, if there's no AJ Brown and there's no Devonta Smith, like he's an easy play. We'll see if Brown can make it back for this week, but coming off this hamstring injury, he might even be limited a bit, even if he does play. Devonta, we'll see if he can make it through concussion protocol, but it doesn't look likely. So Dallas Goedert, it's just he's a necessity for Jalen Hurts, right? Who else is going to pass to? And if you're going to be a necessity at the tight end position, I can't rank him outside of the top 5 because the tight end position is so disgusting this year.
Yeah, I think the one concern I have here with Dallas Goedert is that play last week. A lot of things happened in their favor. It was not a very good matchup, but the Saints guys kind of slammed into each other, fell to the ground, and there was a lot of running room for Dallas Goedert. And that's what Dallas Goedert is, by the way. He is a big play tight end. So sometimes you get frustrated if he doesn't get the consistent volume, but he's a big play tight end. They can get down the seam. And again, if they're missing Smith and Brown for big plays, he's going to have to fill that void here quite a bit. And it doesn't look good for either wide receiver. So Goddard can be the go-to guy. I'm just a little bit wary because he's not going to get a touchdown necessarily, and it could end up being like 2 big catches, right? It could be like 2 for 50, and that's at the end of his day as they move on or they run the ball or do something like that. So I think he's a little bit more volatile to me, even though he had the big game. Well, that's his entire career. He's very volatile and needs a lot of things to fall into place, like the receivers getting hurt and the matchup being right to really produce. So that's why I dropped him at the borderline of tight end ones this week. Now, what do we do with the Ravens here? I mean, Mark Andrews, Isaiah likely had the big week 1, but it's been quiet for both these guys ever since here. I don't know what you're going to get from Andrews and Likely. I just don't anymore, but I do know that Andrews, I'd still play him. I think you have to because you drafted him high. If you don't get that this week, then I think it's time to forget the name on the back and look for a replacement.
I know. We have him ranked low, tight end 11 and 10. That's not great especially for Mark Andrews. It's a tough matchup against the Bills, and he played only 33% of snaps last week. Like he got 1 target later in the game. Like he's just not out there. He's not running routes. I don't really understand. He's not doing anything. I don't know if he's injured or they're holding back. But also Isaiah Likely since week 1 has been nothing. You have him ranked at tight end 9 this week, and maybe it's just because of the situation we have with tight ends. I'm down at tight end 18. Like I'm kind of over this Isaiah Likely thing. Maybe we have another big game from him, but I don't think we're going to be able to predict when that will be. I don't know what you do with the situation. Like if you're able to pick up Dallas Goedert, like if you had him, I'm playing him over Mark Andrews for sure. And then there's 2 other guys that I would consider, like Cole Kmet next week. I grabbed him off of waivers this week, and I think he's the better play over Mark Andrews. He gets the Rams. He finally was running a ton of routes last week. They moved on from trying the Gerald Everett thing, went to Cole Kmet, and it worked out. So I'm playing Cole Kmet over Mark Andrews as well. What about Tyler Conklin, though, against the Broncos? Would you consider that?
I'll have to think a long hard of that one because I've Cole Kmet easily this week over Mark Andrews. I mean, he's just too involved now all of a sudden. I have him at number 7. You have him all the way up at number 8. So you're really high on him as well. Now, when you look at Andrews, yeah, just it's very hard to trust. I'm putting him maybe as a default ranking there because again, I have faith in these guys that have produced for maybe longer than I should have, but I think they got to get Andrews going. I think they've heard a lot about it, and the Bills, you can throw on them a little bit in the middle of the field. The wide receivers could be bundled up, so it could be a big Andrews unlikely game. That's why I can't drop him too much. He's too important to the offense to keep producing at this relatively low level at tight end.
I know. It's just like you're waiting for the Mark Andrews shoe to drop, and it probably will sooner or later. They'll probably figure it out. It's just like obviously you're never dropping Mark Andrews anytime soon. But if he was on my bench and he ended up having a great game, I think I'm okay with that, right? Because I'm like, okay, they're getting him involved. I feel better about him moving forward. But I don't want to put him in my lineup again with I mean, 2 out of 3 weeks he scored fewer than 3 fantasy points. He's
Yeah.
just doing nothing. At least with Tyler Conklin, I mean, I guess the first 2 weeks did nothing, but last week he heavily targeted 11 targets, 10 receptions. I can see that. Or sorry, that I was looking at the wrong stat line there. He was a tight end 4 last week. Tyler Conklin was, and he's playing on a ton of snaps. Unlike what we're seeing from Mark Andrews, he's playing on 92% of the Jets snaps this season. And we expect Pat Surtain to take care of Garrett Wilson. So the targets could be there again for Tyler Conklin.
Yeah, I do like Tyler Conklin. Like, if we see this trend continue here, I think he's going to be a guy that emerges as a regular play soon. If some of these tight end disappointments keep going this way, but yeah, I don't really have him too far down. I'm at a 12, so it's competitive with Mark Andrews depending on your scoring format. If you're looking at touchdown dependent, you might go a little bit Mark Andrews because he has a chance to score there. But looking at involvement throughout the game, I think you look at Conklin. So it's pretty close. But yeah, we both have him actually at 12. It's interesting. So Conklin would be a tight end 1 this week, yes, if you need him. Absolutely, with the tight end landscape.
And I'm probably not gonna looking at my rankings. I do have Conklin at 12. I have Andrews at 11. And if on Sunday morning, I know when I'm looking at my lineups, and if I have Andrews and Conklin, there's just no way I'm gonna be brave enough to play
Yeah.
Conklin over Andrews. But I won't be surprised if he outscores him, is what I should say. But yeah, hopefully the tight end position looks a little bit less gross when we're going through it next week. Let's see some more passing. Let's get these tight ends involved. That would be great. That is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. But for your second listen, the new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, and detailed breakdowns all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Enjoy Thursday Night Football, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.